Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. This is episode 20 of the season. We're getting up there. We're getting close to the end of the regular season. So thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this is the show for procurement professionals where we want to show you the art of the possible with procurement technology. And this season, we've been really focused on how do we get you to be successful when you're deploying tools post contract, right? You're in the thick of it in deploying these types of tools. So we're going to talk today really about how to build governance models specifically when you're deploying or using sourcing tools in your organization. And I'm very excited for the guest that's with us today. Always super high energy, always super positive, always a good time. And so we'll get to that in just a second here. But right before that, let me jump into a tiny bit of housekeeping. So as I said, right, show 20, we've got another 6 shows lined up. We are in the governance model / change management part of the season. So we're talking about suites, about intake and orchestration, about SRM or supplier relationship platforms in coming weeks. So make sure you don't miss that. And of course, if you missed any of the shows, this is kind of the first time you're tuning into the show. You can always go back to our YouTube channel and see all the replays of all the episodes we've done so far this year. And of course, everything at the very bottom here is going to culminate with this year, our first inaugural 100% virtual conference called Procure Tech Unpacked. That's going to happen on April 22nd to 24th, 2026 from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. daily. So just a half day where we want you to come as a procurement professional with your peers in breakout sessions. And so like, I want you to make a new best friend essentially, right? But we're going to show you with folks who are with us along the whole season, the art of the possible in different solution categories, what you can do or what you can't do as well with procurement technology, and also how to navigate the procure tech market, right? So very much an education-based event. I'll have a keynote. We have a couple other special guests that will have keynotes on day 2 and day 3, which I'll reveal in coming weeks. And of course, you'll be voting for who wins the Procure Tech Cup this year. So who's the Procure Tech Educator of the Year among our partners. And so very excited to be putting that on. It's taking shape. And so if you'd like to grab a ticket, they're going out fast. More than half of them are sold now. Scan this QR code. It will take you to a small survey, ask you a few questions, make sure that the event is for you. Right. I don't want you getting a ticket to an event that you're not going to get value out of. And of course, it's first come, first serve. So that's my little housekeeping here for this week. Now, if we shift our focus to the actual content of today's show, we'll briefly talk about, hey, what's a sourcing solution? Just making sure we're all on the same page. I'll bring out my market map that I do every week. And then we'll get into the details right around how we should be thinking about building governance models for sourcing tools, pre-go live, post-go live of these solutions, and 3 main points, right? To nail the basics. What does that mean? Managing through the tool, which you might be able to guess the lesson is, right? But we'll go through that, and then partnering with your vendor and what that actually means. And we have like a continuum concept to expose to you on that front. But before we get into that, let me bring on my guest for today, Jules from Fairmarkit. How's it going?
It's going fantastic. It's Friday afternoon. Like we're feeling good right now.
Yeah, and I know, as you're SVP of Customer Success and Delivery at Fairmarkit, I think you had a big event this week, right? So I wanted to thank you right out of the gate for making the time for us.
No, like I said, these are especially at the end of the week. This is the best way to kind of celebrate a hard worked week. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So we'll get straight into it. I'm actually coming to you from Kingston, Ontario this week. It's March break, so I think we're both off the tail end, or in the flow of or a different flow than usual. So I also welcome the show this week. And so just, a sourcing solution, right? Like when we talk about sourcing solutions, at least from my perspective on the pure procurement market map, it's that yellow circle, right? So we analyze our spend, we look at the budgets and what we need from a demand standpoint for upcoming years or upcoming periods for budgeting purposes, and we build our pipeline of what we need to execute on as a procurement function. We develop our category management strategies, and that's all upstream of sourcing, right? Sourcing to me is really the first part of executing on those category strategies and going and maximizing the value for our needs, right? Whether they be punctual or stuff that we've planned in our project portfolio. And then that feeds into contract management and actually formalizing the results of those sourcing events or sourcing initiatives, right? And then that fits into everything else we've got on the map here around intake and orchestration, supplier relationship management. So that's how I think about sourcing. Jules, anything you'd add on to that definition?
No, you nailed it. You positively nailed it.
And I know you guys also, like at Fairmarkit, maybe this is a good segue to like the one pager on you guys, but you also do a bit of intake, which we didn't have highlighted on the slide, but I'd love to give you a chance to walk us through, how you guys do sourcing at Fairmarkit and why you play outside just that scope that we just outlined.
Yeah, I think like the simplest way to put it is we always like to use this conveyor belt analogy at Fairmarkit, where under the sourcing umbrella, I think historically it's always been thought of as, whether your procurement organization is centralized or decentralized, things are getting purchased, things are getting requested from across the business. And I think one of the things that we found over the last few years was it wasn't merely enough to have a tool that was centered around solely the buyer experience. And in the conveyor belt analogy, what was happening oftentimes were by the time the buyer got the PR from someone across the business, someone in marketing, someone in technology, someone from wherever across the business, it was almost too late to run a full-fledged sourcing event. And so what we started to do is started to capture sort of some of those requests earlier on in the conveyor belt to give a full-fledged requester experience. It's not quite orchestration. It's an attachment in a fully orchestrated kind of ecosystem where a requester will come in. They'll put in, a sufficient level of information to make sure that they've provided the procurement team with enough information so that ultimately they can run a sourcing event. And a sourcing event in this case could be, they route it to a catalog. It could be that they route it to a full 3 bids and a buy experience. It could be that they run an auction. It could be that they run a negotiation. And so I think for us, it's really just about capturing a really, really, really clean, easy user experience to just capture the demand wherever it starts.
And I think then, to your point around all the different things that it can become, like at Fairmarkit, I think you guys are focused on, being that sourcing platform for all types of spend, right?
Exactly. We call it at Fairmarkit, we call it total sourcing. We've made a ton of investment to make sure that we can capture, the very, very basic transactional tail spend, your repetitive purchases that might be prime candidates to be, autonomously sourced. I know that that's like the biggest buzzword of all time, but really a touchless sourcing event is something that can be run pretty repetitively with fairly low risk, but where we've made a ton of investments over the last couple of years has been in that more highly complex sourcing side where you might want to run, more of a strategic RFP and things like that. So really, we've gone really, really, really deep on the sourcing side of the source to pay process, but we've gone wide in terms of the type of spend that we want the platform to be able to be optimized for.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to call that out because I know, to your point, right? Like you started nascently in the tail spend space, and I've seen you guys. Yeah, I've seen you guys evolve to be able to, have one tool for all types of spend, all types of categories, all types of event, right? So
it's been a journey.
Yeah, very cool. And then on the intake front, like I think what I want to call out as well is it allows you to fit into any tech stack, right?
Yeah.
In the sense where person doesn't have anything else or the organization doesn't have anything else, then you can handle intake, right? But if they do have a source to pay tool or an intake and orchestration layer, like you can fit into that as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think like, especially working with the enterprise, right? They have tools, they have so many tools, so many tools. And so I think early on, it was very clear to us that we had to be a tool that played well with others, that complemented, that integrated well with, that in some ways had relationships with, so that we could distinguish, here's what you're doing this for, here's what you're doing that for. And so that, from inception has been, something that's really, really important to us. We understand for some, we might be a great standalone tool, but given the complexity of the enterprise, it's unlikely. It's more likely that most of our customers, our partners are going to have tens of different tools that they use. So it's really, really important that we play really well with those.
Agreed. All right. So if you want to learn more about Fairmarkit specifically, I have put the 2 QR codes here, right? So the one on top is if you want to watch our first show where we went a bit into more detail around what Fairmarkit does. And if you want to get in touch with the team, get a demo, that's that second QR code that you can also use. And as we get into this second part of the show here, right, the conversation around governance models and how to be successful when using sourcing tools. I'll invite you as well if you want to leave a question in the chat. This is live, right? So I can ask your question to Jules as we go here, as I see them coming in. So that being said, Jules, how should we think about governance models in the sourcing tool context?
Let's do it. I think, and part of what I love working with you and doing these with you, Joel, is I think we can be honest. We can call things out. We can be our sort of true, authentic selves. And I think this topic in particular is one, when we were talking about it, it was making me laugh, because to us, like, I'm going to start with sort of a confession. When we go we start with like a kickoff with a customer. The truth of the matter is, as soon as we get to the governance side, that's where people like start multitasking.
Their eyes glaze over.
Their eyes glaze over. They start yawning. You see the "be right back," or "I just got pulled into another call." Like, it's just kind of the point of our kickoffs, and then like subsequent follow-up sessions where they're like, yeah, we got this. It'll be fine. And the reality of it is like unsexy of a topic as it is, it ultimately is the most important thing in terms of keeping the train on the rails as it relates to implementing a technology like ours. And I know that for really anyone in our space, anyone in SaaS probably understands this as well, is your technology is only in the usage and adoption of your technology is it's only as good as the governance model that you build, or that you build with your customers. And so I think, like we called it out here, it's like it's very, very, very rare that we would ever see a customer be unsuccessful because of, a fundamental flaw in the product or anything like that. It's all because there's not a clear operating model or governance structure in place. And so I think, like, calling out, we'll talk through this a little bit more, but just like having ownership, not having consistent processes, there's no decision path, there's no improvement loop, there's just not a lot of communication happening. That is where we see breakdowns and failures. And if we see a customer looking back saying, why weren't we able to, get live when we were wanting to get live, or why weren't we able to get usage adoption to the place that we wanted to get to, it all comes back to this. And so one of the things that we try to do at Fairmarkit is, the teams that we work with, they're so busy. We'll talk about that in a second. There's so many different things going on. It's very rare that we'll work with a team where the implementation of our tool is their sole focus. It's just the reality of working with the enterprise. And so what we try to do is keep it really simple. We built this very, very basic equation that we use with our customers when we're kicking off, or even before that. That is, governance equals decision-making, ownership, and cadence. Like, governance is this big kind of buzzwordy umbrella. Exactly. And so when we get into the slide about governance models, or we start doing some discovery around governance model, we try to be very explicit in terms of what we mean. And so this equation is one that we kind of live and breathe by, and we've seen a lot of success with when we break it down and keep it super simple with our customers.
Yeah, and I love it, right? And when you were saying that, inconsistent processes, like, we'll think of that, rings a bell on the functional side, right? Like, different ways to source. But here, I think what you mean is like inconsistent, like communication or escalation processes, right?
Yep,
so,
exactly.
So just to tie it back to that equation, which I love it, I'm sure we'll refer back to over and over again as we go through here.
Yeah, I think like this one kind of goes through like something that's so specific to procurement, right? Is you have all of these different stakeholders. And then once you're at the enterprise level, it's like you will have multiple of these stakeholders. We have many projects that have multiple project managers on there and multiple executive sponsors that might live in procurement. They might live in finance. They might live in digital transformation. They might live in different aspects of the business. And so it's really, really important. Like, and we start this during our pre-sale process. We want to understand who's involved. What do they care about? What is sort of their decision-making level? And so this is kind of just intended to say there's going to be a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And at the end of the day, my best recommendation, both for vendors and then for, end user customers, is just map this out, make it as clean as possible, make it as clear as possible. And it's not always easy. There's people that shift and move around or leave companies and things like that, but at least build out the model so that you know who your people are, what they care about, why they're going to, be involved in certain aspects of the project. I think one of the big things that we tell our customers and we live and breathe by at Fairmarkit, is that if everybody owns it, nobody owns it. And so one of the things that we try to push our customers to when we're building out things like our project plans and things like that is don't have multiple owners for the same thing as much as possible, because then it's unclear who's actually the person that's supposed to be driving the day-to-day actions that need to be taken. And so you might have, a governance, roles and responsibility org chart or something like that has 40 people on it. But once you start getting down to brass tacks and you start outlining who should be doing what for specific tasks and areas of, the implementation or the ongoing maintenance of the project or tool, make sure that you have a single owner. It's not easy to do, but it's something that our customers that have done that have been by and far the most successful, because the work actually starts getting done.
Yeah, and I apologize if there's a background noise. The air conditioning just went off here, and it's pretty loud. But hey, it's live TV, right? So
air conditioning in Canada? What are we talking about?
Maybe it's the heater. I don't know. I've got a sweater on. I don't
seeing
know.
The snow out there. There's no chance you guys need air conditioning right now.
You caught me. Caught me. But I couldn't agree more. Right? Like I think if you can't put your governance model on a slide, you do not understand it, right? As when you're creating a project charter. And I love that you said you started as a software vendor during the pre-sales process, right? Trying to figure it out. And we'll probably get into this a bit more, but I find it's a continuum where certain orgs are very strict and like rigid around their governance models, and like they're gonna put a project manager in there, and he's gonna be or she's gonna be the locomotive of the project, and we just want the software vendor to be a cart on that train, right? Whereas at the other end of the continuum completely is like we don't do any of that, right? So we're relying on the software vendor to like pull the train and so to structure the governance, so to speak. Do you see that in your projects?
Oh yeah, we see that all day long. I would say, like, to use a sample size, let's pretend I'm just going to use like simple numbers right now. Let's say we had at any given point, 20 different implementations that are going on globally of our tool. And some of those are going to be varying levels of, are they rolling out the tool globally? Are they keeping it heavily concentrated? Are they using one module? Things like that. But if to use the number 20, we probably have 5 that are on the spectrum that is full-fledged governance, where it is really, really clearly baked out, and we are merely, like, to your point, we're merely like a locomotive on sort of the path there. But then we have, on the other end, we probably have 5 that are just, they've never even implemented software before, and they're looking to us to guide them. And then the remainder are all sort of in the middle. So we see that all day long. And I think, again, what's good about that equation that we had talked about is keeping it simple. You can keep it simple for a complex customer because that has to be the case. You still have to keep it simple for them. But then for the others on the other end, they're going to need something simple too, because if you start making it too complex, they're going to get really confused and really stressed out, and they're not going to think that they're mature enough for the tool. So that's why the simplistic model is one that we've kind of lived and breathed by, because it's something that'll serve both ends of that spectrum.
Yeah. Great. So I'm glad that's your reality that you've seen as well, right? Because that's what I see all the time in consulting work as well. So it kind of brings us to those 3 lessons we wanted to discuss, right? We've probably touched on a couple of them already, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, like, when we talk about it's one thing, I think for us, like, it's one thing for us with our customers. They're like, okay, it's great. We understand governance matters. We need to have a structure in place. Like, we'll talk about this during the pre-sale, and then they'll say to us, like, but what does that actually mean in practice? Like, what do we need to do to be successful? What have your other customers done from a governance standpoint to make, the rollout of the tool really successful? And I know also I want to call out, I've talked a lot about kind of like the implementation aspect of the tool. There's so much more that goes into, once the tool is live, a steady state environment where you're continuously rolling out to new users and things like that. Like, this is something that the implementation aspect, you're probably going to have some more people involved because you're getting it stood up, you're building a foundation, but having a governance model in place for, the entirety of your partnership is going to be really important. So I want to call that out. But getting into, like, well, what do you do about it? What are our sort of recommendations? What's an action plan or things that you can take from this that would hopefully, be something that you can, move and mold and actually, act on? There's kind of 3 themes that we talk about. It's nailing the basics. It's managing through the tool itself, like utilizing the tool to help with the governance structure. And then actually just partnering with the vendor and having really open questions and dialogue with your vendor. So in terms of going to the first one with nailing the basics, like these are things like fundamentally that seem so simple, but in reality are things that often get looked over because of how simple they are, or so obvious, right? We talked a little bit about like calling out clear ownership and, making sure that there's a very, very clear owner, even at the, not only at sort of like the program level, but also on the individual task level as you're looking to assign work to people. Making sure that by the time you start working with your vendor, you have a very, very clear understanding of what it is that you're setting out to do, what your goals are, and making sure that you're very, very clear with the vendor on, what that North Star or what that end goal looks like, so that the vendor can then tailor, their strategy for implementing around hitting that goal. Because likely your vendor has done this tens of hundreds of thousands of times, and they're going to have some really good ideas, for how to best sort of set the foundation in what path to go down to get to the goals that you want to achieve. I think for us, like one of the big parts of governance, I think that is oftentimes not thought of as governance is success criteria. We'll have customers that come to us, they'll purchase the tool, they'll go through the pre-sales, they'll build out a perceived business case on their side, and then we'll actually go and start working with the team that's going to be using and implementing the tool, and they won't really have any clear understanding of what they're actually working towards, what goals they're looking to achieve. And so we're very, 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 we're a competitive bunch at Fairmarkit. And so we're very, very goal oriented. It's just kind of in our nature. It's the type of people that we've brought onto the team. It's just the way that we're wired as a team and a business. And so we try to get our customers on that same page. We really, really try to push making sure that we have clear success measures in place, not only before we kick off the project, but before, when we're in that steady state, before we say things like, all right, now let's layer in auctions or negotiations or, something that feels sort of next phase advanced. Let's make sure that we have a very, very clear understanding of what the success criteria is going to be. So that's a huge, huge part of it.
And if I can add to that, right, like to conceptualize it for people, like it's based on how your org is structured, right? But I usually look at three big buckets of like deliverables, right, within the project, like project management deliverables. Like I need a change management plan, a deployment plan. So project management owns that. Then there's functional, which is probably your subject matter expert. If you've got a functional lead on the IT side, like that'll be the functional work, and you need to work through like who owns what in there. And there's the technical side, which can be composed of like interfaces, architecture, data, and user management, right? And those might all be separate people within that technical side as well, depending on how you're structured. So I really think about like, okay, what are the deliverables? Who owns them in those different buckets? And then how often do we need to check in on them to make sure that, the sequence is right from a project management or project plan standpoint, right?
100%. Procurement is, it's a magical place, but it's a tough place too, because procurement sits in the middle of so many different parts of the business, right? So this isn't like, just the marketing team went out and bought a tool that's going to be used to, track leads, MQ1 leads or something like that. Like procurement it's so foundational to the rest of the business, right? So the sheer number of stakeholders is like vast, generally, is what we'll see. And the goals and priorities across who would be key stakeholders. Marketing would be a key stakeholder of the Fairmarkit tool getting rolled out, because marketers are going to use the tool, right? And so what the marketing team cares about is likely something that the procurement team, as they're thinking about the business case and the implementation strategy, they also have to consider the goals and objectives and priorities of all these other parts of the organization. And so I think like there's some uniqueness to procurement tools in that sense, because it's not just some team that can kind of go and work in a silo and just kind of do their thing and, be successful and get ROI in the tool. It's like procurement has, they answer to everybody. And so that makes it really, really cool and impactful in a lot of ways, right? But it makes sort of the standing up and the foundation building, it just makes it that much more complex, just because there's so many people and stakeholders involved.
Which relates back to your point that the governance model will change over time. And if you're interested in like diving into this more, people that are watching, like we did a show on change management for sourcing tools and deployment planning for sourcing tools. And I feel like, they kind of all go together, right? In a sense where if you're not deploying marketing until much later, like they don't need to be in the governance model short term, or maybe they need to be in the design a little bit at the beginning as a stakeholder, but you're going to shift that governance model depending on different phases of how you roll out the tool and the processes that it supports as well, right?
Totally. Yeah. Building out something like a RACI chart, right? Like we have multiple versions or multiple evolving versions of a RACI chart exactly based off of this. There's going to be certain aspects where, the core team that's going to implement the tool, they need to be super, super, super involved. They're responsible. They're accountable for all these things. And then you have a whole group of stakeholders that's always just kind of going to be informed. And then they swap to consulted once you start building out the tool to be used for them. At some point, they become responsible for things. And so I think having when we talked about nailing the basics, it's about figuring that out long term, just modeling that out. And then the individuals you sort of plug and play as you roll out the tool and it becomes more relevant for them. But nailing the basics is really just about making sure, hey, we know we're going to roll out the tool long term, but how are we going to do that in a way that makes sure that by the time we get to new stakeholder groups that may not have been involved from day one, we at least have a model in place that we can build on. It's like a rinse, repeat, recycle as you're using the tool, across the business.
You've built the bus and when you're going to pick people up and drop people off, right?
100%. Exactly. That's a great analogy.
And I know we could probably go on for another half hour. I see time flying here. If we quickly touch on our two other lessons learned here, and we've kind of been touching on them, but I'd love to call them out specifically.
You and I are a dangerous pair. We could do this all day long. So on the other two, they're simple, right? They're still sort of simple. And I think nailing the basics means more. It's just nailing the basics is about building the foundation. Managing through the tool is more like a reminder that you as an organization, you're buying these tools that have really, really good, likely data modules within them. And so treat the platform as a tool that you can actually use to help with your governance model. Make sure that the right people have the right level of access. Make sure you're using reporting in a way that's going to be useful and consistent. And don't just think that you have to do this all on your own or reinvent the wheel from scratch. So many of these vendors that you're working with, we're getting pressure all the time from our customers to make sure that the tool itself is going to lend itself to a really, really, really healthy governance model. Leverage, things like, analytics modules and things like that for the leadership team to make sure they're getting fed on a regular basis and things like that. So use your tools really, really wisely and ask your vendor. This goes into the last one is as you're evaluating, implementing with, managing your relationship long term, bring your vendor along for the ride. Make sure that you help them understand sort of what governance means to you as an organization. Tell them what part of the spectrum that you sort of live on, and understand that your best vendors are going to be ones that can flex and understand and support you regardless of what sort of part of that journey you're on and what you're going to need from them. So make sure communicate our customers that communicate with us the most directly and tell us, what to expect, whether it's complex, whether it's fun all the time. They're the ones that we have the best relationships with because we have that sort of open, shared understanding that we're both going to share the responsibility here. So communicate with them and know that they're going to be open to hearing what has worked well for you as an organization and things that you find challenging. They will be able to adapt with you, or they should be able to.
And I love both those points, right? And the first one, I would just add, if you're a project sponsor, if you have a project sponsor for a project like this, managing through the tool means they're going into the tool and asking questions based on what they see in the reports that are in that tool, right? And likely post go live as well. So it means, they also need to be a stakeholder group. They need to be trained. And if they start managing through the tool and say hey, if it's not in the tool, it doesn't exist, essentially, then adoption kind of goes on fast forward because of that governance model that's driven through the tool. And for partnering with vendors, I think the only other thing I would add is, and you referred to it earlier, if your vendors that you're looking at aren't asking you questions that make it so that they're trying to determine where you are on that governance continuum, and they're kind of just glazing over that slide as well, to use your image from the start of the presentation, then to me that's like a yellow turning amber light on that vendor, right? It means that they haven't hit that roadblock before, or that issue before, and they're probably lacking a bit of maturity.
Yep.
So all right, cool. And then just to give us a little visual kind of what that governance model, how when it comes to life, what it should look like? I know you prepared a little visual for us here.
Yeah, we use and it goes back to the point of like talking to your vendors. Like we have customers that come to us with a multi-step governance structure that works and always is tried and true for them, and so we'll adapt our model to that. But for others that fall on the continuum where they might not have something super solid in place, or they want to come to us to design it, this is just goes into an example of what we see work really, really well with our customers. Let's make sure we get the right people in the right room at the right time. Let's try to not have calls that have 30 different people with different levels of involvement and understanding of the platform. So, but let's make sure that, you know, at the leadership level, they still have a forum that makes sense for them so that they can ask their questions as well. And so this is just a 3-tier, very, very simple 3-tier governance structure that we've seen work really well with our customers, that we try to, when we're sort of the ones that are building the strategy and dictating what we should do, what success looks like, when we've led sort of the governance structure model, this is typically what we use.
Yeah. And I find it just illustrates, it brings the formula that you shared at the beginning together, right? Like where's the decision levels, right? For different types of decisions, who's going to own different types of issues too. And then the cadence, quarterly, monthly, weekly, based on the context of, you know, are they deliverable based decisions that need to be touched on, like blocker based decisions on the project every week? And or more than that, if it's a testing period, for example, right, or hypercare, or is it something where it's just kind of a, hey, here are the big kind of strategic decisions that we need to be able to plan for the next month, next 3 months down the line that can go at the executive governance level. So.
Yep, and establish this from day one. Like I think we have a customer we have multiple customers that have fallen into this. They've been using our tool for several years, but have been sort of rolling it out on a cadence globally. And we put this governance structure in place with them from day one. And so they know we have our 3 times a week Scrum meetings. We have our monthly steering committee meeting. We have a quarterly executive review. And so everyone across the organization, well, we've had people swap in and out. It means that they know, like we always keep those meetings updated with the right people. We put out the reports on the cadence that we say we're going to. And so everybody knows when to show up to ask the questions that they need. And it's been working now for a few of these customers for several years at this point. So my recommendation to everyone is get this right. You don't need to get it right from day one, but you need to establish something day one. And of course you can iterate on it, but start this from day one. Don't wait months into the implementation to start this.
And it's simple, right? Like it holds on. If it can't hold on a slide, it's probably too complicated.
Exactly.
So thanks so much, Jules, for coming on the show and for everybody tuning in. We are getting to the end of the season here. If you want to keep getting the invites for the shows and also get the insights that we share weekly on the Pure Procurement newsletter, you've got that QR code on the left-hand side to get in touch with myself and the Pure Procurement team. And Jules, I know you guys also prepared a little something, and I'd love if you'd let people know how they can get a hold of you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. We put together, like I said, it's in our DNA at Fairmarkit to shoot straight with our customers, with those in the industry and things like that. And so Joel linked this QR code there to access some of the content that we put together about everything you want to know about agentic AI, but are too afraid to ask because LinkedIn is constantly blowing you up with new content and things like that. So easy access there. Come find us. We're happy to talk to you about any of your questions around, not just sort of the direction of our platform, but where we sort of see the future of agentic AI. Everybody's talking about it, but we're happy to be honest with you about it.
And the fundamentals that we've talked about on this episode and on the show, like even in the agentic AI deployments, are still relevant. Right. Yeah. That's a super important point, right? It's like agentic AI gets talked about like it's just this magic bullet, but nobody knows like what shape it takes, or you still need all the hard work behind it to deploy it.
Totally. And I think like, yeah, exactly. Like we'll be able to share, like we love to share sort of like the raw, honest truth behind it is, we have tons of customers that are running thousands of touchless sourcing events or leveraging, different agents throughout the platform to help accelerate and do some of the more mundane things that they're doing. But the reality is you still need your people and you still need process and you still need governance and things like that. And I think what we've tried to crack over the last couple of years with this big boom of AI is how do you leverage that? How do you make sure that you layer it in the platform so that it's useful to users and things like that? But also like, how do you go into these organizations and say, hey, we want to make sure you understand, like, you do still need your people, you still need your process. And now this is just really about optimizing both of those things.
Yeah. And I think that's super important, right? Like throughout time, and then we'll let you guys go because Jules and I could keep talking for half an hour.
You and I will stay on all day.
But it just, I think agentic AI to me is just gonna, we're gonna ask people to do more with the same amount of resources or time or what money, et cetera, right? Like there's a big fear narrative around like, oh, we're just going to cut down procurement departments to single people. But I think it's completely the opposite, right? Like it's never been that in history. And I don't think agentic AI changes that.
Totally agree.
On that note, optimistic note, right? If you want to develop superpowers or if you want to get more of Jules's raw energy, come to the conference end of April. And if not, well, we'll see you on next week's show. Thanks so much for coming on, Jules. I very much appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Have an awesome weekend. Thank you for having me.